Thank you very much. Okay, so first of all, I was thinking if I should mention something about the signals because I guess they stole the market. So I was thinking about that, but of course, I love the other features that are smaller or bigger regarding the Angular. And one of the features that I was waiting on for the most of the time was about that the reactive forms are finally typed. And going further, maybe I will start from presenting myself. So, who I am? My name is Tomasz. You can find me on the internet by looking for that nickname, which is Tom Walker. And the history behind that nickname is that I'm big fan of Star Wars universe, everything related to that. And I was thinking about my nickname for some time, and I noticed that okay, if my name is Tomasz, in short it is Tom, then I just combine that. Okay, we have Luke Skywalker, so I use just Tom, but not Skywalker, but Walker. Yay. Okay. Yeah, but straight to the topic, I have 10 years of experience in the industry. I just prefer to work on the front end, and I started working on the Angular version 1, so it was Angular JS, and when then the TypeScript was introduced, I was really surprised, and I was just yeah, let's do that, let's use that. It was really surprising. And when they introduced the topic of my presentation, then I was finally. So yeah, okay. So the contents. I will mention how it was before the Angular version 14, because with that version it was the reactive typed forms were introduced. And then, of course, I will elaborate how we can use them, what are the features are, and the perfect duo with components, how I'm just using them with Angular, with my projects, with my applications. So, so before the typed forms, it was something like that up to version 13 of the Angular, the reactive forms weren't typed. And I made a pure simple example of the form that, as you can see, we have a name, we have account enabled config with nested two properties, two controls, line and entry. And what I'm doing, I'm assuming that from the HTML part, I'm calling the form submit handler on the form submission, and then I'm taking that value, these form values of the value of that form, and then passing him to this API call, which is representing, let's say, for example, some kind of API endpoint. And up to that version of with Angular version 13, before the typed forms, that won't throw an error, because as you can see, I'm, for example, sending the name property from the form, but on the API call, I'm expecting that would be a nick. So, and similar to the count, it is typed, the name is okay for that, that's fine, but the form is producing the integer, but I'm expecting that count would be a string of type of string. So yeah, and of course, similar to the enabled, that on the enabled, I'm expecting the yes or no value, string values, but the enabled on my form is a Boolean value. So that is something that wouldn't be okay from the endpoint perspective, but Angular won't throw an error on that. And so the type forms were finally introduced to the Angular version 14, and as far as I remember, it was year something around October, as far as I remember. And the typed forms and the change with that is that this is the example how it was combined, how it was explained during the previous version. So as you can see, we are having abstract control dot value, and that value is set to the type of any. So it's old approach, just an any, so we don't know what is actually there. And going to the version from version 15, from version 14, this is This is the type of that same form, which I just showed you before. And that is actually even an error during from the Visual Studio Code, for example, that I'm expecting a nick property, but it's not there. I mean, it's just declared, but the form is just throwing something else. And as you can see, of course, there are types on the controls, on the properties. So yeah, so right now the life, if that is much more easier. And if we are talking about the features and what actually you can, how we can use those components, those type forms. First of all, like I showed you, we have that the type, the value is typed. So for example, that name, it has string or null. I will come back to that in a second about that null. And of course, the form groups, form arrays are typed as well. And other properties related to the reactive forms, as for example, value changes. It of course it's emitting. There is a subscription behind that, and that subscription has of course the value typed as well. So then we can of course see easily if we have issue, for example, with the backend or not, if there is a typo, let's say, in the name, or it's a different type of that property, specific property from the form. And talking about that null, all of the controls, form groups, and so on has that null. It could be nullable, so it could be set to as a null by the default. And whenever we don't want that feature, we don't want that it could be set as a null. Then in the reactive typed reactive forms, there is a property which you can set on the control, for example, that it cannot be nullable. So the property is called non-nullable, and whenever we set that to true, then it will be then it will just the type will be just set to string. So then you are sure that okay, there is a value. There should be, of course, a value. And another feature, of course, when the Angular team introduced the typed reactive forms, many applications that we are developing had a lot of forms, and those forms, okay, were not typed. So how we can just proceed from one step to the another without breaking the whole of the application, whole of the code base. And when we are just migrating from the Angular version from 13 to version 14, then the CLI during the migration process is just changing all of the form controls, all of the form groups and form arrays to the untyped form. So everything works as it is, but right now we have that, we are safe that we can use that untyped form group, and then eventually step by step, control by control, form group by form group, and so on, we can just change it to the specific type, just use the typing which is just provided, which is just set to the specific form. And by meaning that perfect duo with components, what actually I mean behind that is that whenever I'm working on the component on the which has form, I'm trying to achieve the situation that my component is only responsible for that form. So for example, in that situation, as you can see, I added a dedicated file with the form definition. I will show you in a second. But that form is used only in that component, app component in the situation, and that component is responsible only for that form, nothing much. It just emits the data. And we are talking about the content. This is the content of that form. So I will just move that the definition which you could saw earlier. That right now there is a form group and it contains all of the properties, all of the controls, and one additional thing which I love to use is that I don't have to export the whole form to achieve to to get the type of that form, but instead of, I'm using the type from the TypeScript, and I'm using a return type util that it takes just a type of that config form, and then it just returns the whole type of that form. So then I can just easily use that on the specific component. So as you can see, for example, in here, I move the component that I move that form to that file, and then I'm just calling that form, and it is we have to know that we should call it, because whenever we won't call it, we just store it as a just static constant. Then there could be a situation that whenever the components reloads, then we will have the same values as just in the, let's say, previous session, because there will be exactly the same instance of that specific form. So it is nice just to call that instead of just using a simple constant in that situation. And how I'm using that the type, that config form type, I'm just extracting from that type, from the config form type, I'm extracting a value property, which is just on the form level, and that value, that type of that value, I'm just set it on the API call property value property for that. And then right now I am finally sure that in this situation, in this particular situation, everything will be okay. So I am sure that there won't be any issues regarding the typing or regarding the type by itself, and then I can just easily proceed with the rest of the features that I should do in this situation. So yeah, pretty much I guess that's it. Short topic, but I really love those. Let's say maybe it's not a tiny feature, but during those signals and all of the changes that I just love to keep mention about those tiny features, tiny changes, and smaller, let's say, parts of the Angular. Thanks.